thank you for attending this press conference. I wish to start this week with the most topical issue. And in that light, just to start with an article that is published in the new taxpayer-funded new nation of Guyana, the Chronicle. And in this article, which carries extensively the comments made by Vincent Alexander, a PNC-nominated commissioner, and Harman. I believe they not only gave a distorted view of the issues at GECOM, but they did a hatchet job on the individual, Mr. Vishnu Prasad. And I'm very worried that unless if this goes unanswered, this person may never find a job anywhere else, having this distortion about his qualification and performance just to justify a partisan political aim or decision at GECOM, that they will stoop so low as to, in this manner, denigrate this individual. However, let us examine the details around what is in the article. So Vincent Alexander said that the reason why Vishnu Prasad was not appointed as DCO is because he lied about his qualification, and two, that his past performance sank him. Now let us examine the history of what took place at GECOM. First of all, Vishnu Prasad, who is no member of the People's Progressive Party, not even a supporter of the PPP, was there in GECOM from 2001 as the PRO. Vincent Alexander joined GECOM about 10 years ago in 2007. In 2014, Vishnu Prasad was appointed the substantive DCO of GECOM without a casting vote. So what it meant is that both sides would have had to support his appointment as DCO at that time, because there was no need for a casting vote. At that time, Alexander was on the commission. There was no issue about his performance, no issue about his qualification at that time. He was appointed DCO. Now, that's point number one. Point number two, if you argue that the performance was bad, then we should look at the performance appraisal done by the machinery at GECOM. Was there an adverse performance appraisal throughout the entire history in his tenure as DCO, or even before that? Was that used as the basis for disqualifying him, since his past performance sank him? Now, had that been the case, did he have a bad track record and he faked his qualification, I don't believe they would have appointed him substantively DCO in 2014, with support from both sides. So this is where we are today. So why did was Vishnu fired? Vishnu Prasad fired because of incompetence or lack of qualification? The answer was no. He lost his job because his contract expired in the period when there was no commission functioning. And that's how he lost the job as DCEO. Was not fired for bad performance, was not fired because of a lack of qualification. So clearly, something is very wrong here. And I believe you have to look to the motive behind Vincent Alexander to get the true picture. He goes on to give several explanations in this article. He says that having interviewed those persons who put scores down, Vishnu emerged. This is Alexander saying, Vishnu emerged with the highest average because the PPP scored him very high. We scored him average, and therefore he emerged with the highest score. So they scored him average. Now I have here where PNC commissioners gave individuals, several other individuals, because they were interviewing several individuals for different posts, 100% of the marks, and 0 to others. Jitendra Singh got 2 zeros from the 2 PNC commissioners. Court Babulal got 2 zeros. Imagine just for showing up, you should get at least one of 100. But they got zeros. And so when Vincent Alexander said this, he was stuttering apparently, and Chronicle carried it exactly the same way. The scores, though he averaged higher, it was evident that they corrupted the system at that point. So I would accept that the system was corrupted. And if the system was corrupted, then who best to investigate the corruption of the system there than the Ethnic Relations Commission? And so, because the Ethnic Relations Commission, the Constitution makes it very, very clear about what it can do, and it has a detailed terms of reference enshrined in the Constitution. And one of which is provide equality of opportunity between persons of different ethnic groups and to promote harmony and good relations between such persons. B, promote the elimination of all forms of discrimination on the basis of ethnicity. J, I'm skipping. J, investigate complaints of racial discrimination and make recommendations on the measure to be taken if such complaints are valid. And where there is justification, therefore, refer matters to the Human Rights Commission or other relevant authorities for further action to be taken. So I think we can put this to rest by a full-fledged investigation by the Ethnic Relations Commission, which has just been newly been constituted. Because we will continue if we do not do that. Enough concerns have been raised by Vincent Alexander himself in this article, speaking about how the system was corrupted. So enough justification on their part for an impartial investigation. Forget what the PPP has been saying. So now let's deal with Joseph Harman. So Harman says, although Vincent Alexander said, I'm not surprised by the complaints and allegations being made by the PPP commissioners. This is nothing new. So he was saying, Vincent Alexander, effectively, that the PPP had always been arguing that you have to have a fair system of hiring within GECOM. He said it's nothing new. So Harman said that the PPP felt that the existing machinery at GECOM had been working well over the years, but is suddenly objecting to the same. He said, we're suddenly objecting. Vincent Alexander said, this is nothing new. They've been saying this all along. And in fact, there are real reasons for us to object in terms of the actions of GECOM and its staff, is that, and those reasons are enshrined in our elections petition that is before the court that we can get heard. For example, Region 8, on the single ballot, we won the region, one ballot, we won that region, and then we lost the member of parliament from that region by one vote. One single vote, unitary vote. And there were several spoiled votes in the region. We asked for a recount. They never gave a recount, refused a recount. Any other part of the world you would have had, it's automatic, you would have had a recount. One vote separated us to get the member of parliament from that region. If that had happened and PNC had lost the elections, you would have had half of Georgetown in flames. But that happened the last elections. And in Region 4, when we asked for a recount, and they said it's too early because the RO had not declared the votes at the regional level as yet. They hadn't been verified, etc. We said, fine, we'll attend the declaration, and then we'll put in our request for a recount. The declaration was made in the evening. We had up to noon of the following day to submit our request for a recount. That is by law. What happened? Our MPs went there to take, some of our party members went there to take the request for a recount. The staff of GECOM, some of them, just closed the office and disappeared. And so this brings me to the next point. So we have always had issues about this. The last elections was the first election that we did not get a list of the presiding officers before the elections. It was normally made available so that both parties, through a process of public vetting, could have said, that person is APNU. And they could say, that person is PPP. They can't be presiding officers because presiding officers have to be impartial. The last elections, the first time since 1992, that we did not get the list of presiding officers. So GECOM decided which presiding officer was going where. So we do have concerns. We have raised these concerns several times, and they're part of our petition. However, so what Harman has said is totally inaccurate. So he goes on to say, as soon as they lose an election, they're trying to discredit it. To me, it's all part of a ploy by the PPP to create the conditions for when they lose. It is basically starting to cry wolf before they lose the elections. They know that the way how things are going, that they're going to be badly beaten. This is Harman talking. When Harman could take his head out of the stand and stop all the bribe taking in the country and everywhere else, then he could make a statement like this. They're busy grabbing because they know they're one-term government. Every ministry is grabbing. Half of these ministers, maybe 90% of them, are in a grab now. Every sector has running. And Harman knows that very well. And they're doing that because they know they're one term. So if you just go on the ground, people are not going to buy into the nonsense. Harman goes to talk to the youths of Region 3. And he said, now it's time for me to listen to you. It wasn't time before. It was not time. Before the elections, they had a voice. Now we're coming up back to the elections, next election. Suddenly the youth, it's time to listen to the young people again. That is how they're going to win. So one thing is clear, that we expected these setbacks. We expected this. We have lived with this for a very long time. But they are not going to deter us from fighting aggressively for free and fair elections. That's one. They're not going to break our spirit with these appointments. They're not going to break our spirit. And there will be consequences. If they think that they can rig the elections and have the kind of peace that we have now, they're wrong. Very, very wrong. I hope they're not thinking that in their calculation. I'm making it clear about that. And it's not coded language. It's not coded, because then the nature of the struggle will be different. We will be struggling against an illegal, illegitimate government that is not in power through the ballot. And it will be a different form of struggle, totally different. So Harman can talk as much as he wants. We will pursue what is right. We'll use the institutions that we established through our Constitution to pursue the claims that we have made that it is an unfair process of hiring people in GECOM, and that the PNC commissioners, who themselves lack diversity, have colluded basically with this chairman who seems to be stuck in the fit and proper mode. I saw his statement recently, today. He is talking about the candidate was fit and proper. It had nothing to do with fit and proper. You had an interviewing panel here. It was not an arbitrary selection the way he was selected. No doubt he has been emboldened by the recent decision of the acting Chief Justice. No doubt he has been emboldened. But the thing is that we will pursue this aggressively before the Ethnic Relations Commission. I think the commissioners have already written to the Ethnic Relations Commission, headed by Smith, Reverend Smith, and we are going to ensure that there is a full-fledged investigation. Vincent Alexander says he doesn't have a problem with it, and that the system was corrupt. I'm using the Chronicle, so we want a clear investigation of that. Now clearly, you know my position. We in the PPP, we don't care which party an individual votes for when they work in the government. We don't care, we never ask that question. When you, under the PPP for 23 years, when you came for a job in the army or the police or anywhere else in the civil service, we never asked the question, who do you support? But in this case, in GECOM, that question must be pertinent, because this is supposed to be an impartial body. Unlike the state, unlike the government, where people's race or their religion or their political views should not matter. But in this case, at GECOM, the political views of the individuals can disqualify them from having positions where they're supposed to act independently, impartially, as independent arbiters. Not for having silent political views. Most people have their political views, but when they publicly express these views. And so I don't want to be unfair to the person who is now selected, but when a person takes a strident political views, as we have seen, actually urging people to vote for APNU in the last elections, criticizing the PPP openly in her social media engagements, how did that not factor people in the discussion? How is it that someone who has no experience whatsoever, no experience in electoral matter, comes out ahead of someone who has been in the system since 2001, who has acted as DCO, who got appointed as DCO with support from both sides in 2014? How come his qualifications are relevant now? How did it not come out in the interview that this person was one of Vincent Alexander's students? Did he recuse himself in the interviewing panel? So this political view that I've seen, and I hope that the chairman looks at this, because it could undermine the perceived impartiality of the commission itself. These are strident political views expressed by the individual who has now just been made the DCU. And if there is one thing that should lead to a reversal of this decision, it's this. In this case, because it's GECOM, not because it's the rest of the government is fine. People can have open political views there in some of these places, excepting constitutional agencies. But so this is a critical matter for us. We'll pursue it. No amount of gaffe by Harman and the others. I think they're desperate over there. But this is not the 70s and 80s. I keep saying that when they rigged elections with impunity, and because at that time, the state controlled the entire media. When you walk down the road, across the road there, if something happened there, I would never have known about it here in this office, just across the street. Because if it didn't get reflected in the state-owned media, that's newspaper or on the radio station, then it didn't happen in Guyana. Very different today. We have an open society. If they think that dictatorships can't thrive in open societies, they can. But there will be an attempt, given the nature of the PNC, an attempt to try to tamper with the elections. But they're not going to find us sitting down. So if Harman and the others think we're going to be a walkover, etc., he better disabuse his mind from that notion. The next thing I want to deal with is this saga about electricity. You know, we have seen a ton of good news stories come out again about what is happening. So, in a Starbuck News report, Patterson said after a post-press conference briefing that by the end of 2018, the government would have installed about 5 megawatts of renewable energy. Pure nonsense. Total nonsense. It's a lie, open lie. You ask him, you will check at the end of 2018. We're just what? 6 months away. And let's see where the 5 megawatts will come from. Where 5 megawatts of power. The only one that I know of is that will come on stream now is something in Maburuma, and that's less than half a megawatt of power. Then talks about that it was 0 under the PPP, and now it's going to be 5 megawatts by the end of 2018. Well, let me tell you something about those the small solar units they're putting in place. That it's a conduit, as I said before, for corruption. A conduit for corruption. And it's not as though in many of those places people are going to get free electricity. They're just going to get it from another source. I'm afraid that 2-3 years down the line, those systems will go down. Then he speaks about money coming from the IDB for new power generating facilities, etc. All these tiny ones around the country. They haven't even started this study as yet. Remember, the same Patterson said, we will start paving the road between Linden to Kurupukari in 2017. We're in 2018, and we haven't completed this study as yet, And that study will determine, the numbers from that study will determine whether we get the grant or not. But he said we'll start paving it in 2017. The study has now been completed, and the study will determine whether the rate of return is appropriate to access the grant, because the UK CIF, that is the facility, has a minimum rate of return for which projects have to qualify. So that was like the Trockman 2017 announcement. They would build the huge facility in New Amsterdam. It's the same thing again. So we hear that the IDB, they're working to secure funds for the future for some small hydro in the hinterland, and that these international organizations are working with them. That's name dropping. They haven't completed the studies. These international agencies, half of the time they're more interested in getting jobs for their consultants. By the time they finish the studies, we'll be past 2020. And most of those small hydros will never get built. But even if it's perfect, assuming we live in a fairy tale world, and we take all that Patterson said as the truth, like it's gospel. And I noticed another one was anyhow, let me don't get down to that. That's just taking me, sidetracking me. But let's take it perfect world. 5 megawatts of power in the hinterland, when by 2020, we were going to get 165 megawatts of power from Amila Falls, coming to the grid, interconnected grid. That is the grid that feeds power from Parika all the way to Skelland and going up to Linden, that area. That's the interconnected grid. So none of these things that they're talking about, the tiny things around the country, is a solution for power in the areas where most of us live. From the corridor from Linden coming down, all the way to West Coast and to the quarantine and in Georgetown. So what's your plan? You notice he's silent. Not a word about that. When we spoke about the system here collapsing. So he talks up these tiny little things in the hinterland, which will not come true. And then he ignores the elephant in the room with what is going to happen with our main power supply to the majority of our population. Nothing about that. And this is the feel good again. So it's a long article about Tumatumari. They're doing a study about Tumatumari, and they're doing one about Moko and Kumu, and every place else, let them, they're going to build a big solar farm, etc. What happens to the people who live along the coast, the business along the coast, who live in Georgetown? Nothing. This is what we get from this government on a daily basis. They're all around the place talking about different things without focusing on the things that are important to us. And then we see again, I spoke about the possibility of gerrymandering of constituencies by these new local government bodies. Well, they have gazetted one now that, well, it's actually 2 in Region 9. But the one that is most, it flies against our constitution, our laws, and the spirit of our engagement with indigenous people, is making Anai and the surrounding areas into an NDC. Now, these villages recently had their elections for 2 shows. They have Amerindian title lands in these areas. their governance system is different. It's enshrined in the Amerindian Act. So the minister now ignores all of that without consultations, imposes a new governance structure on the people, Amerindian communities there who have title lands, and expect them to comply. And I don't see the organizations that represent Amerindian people being outraged by this. So we're going to continue fighting it, apart from some of the other attempts to tamper with other places. I'm not going to go on much further. I take questions from the media. Thank you. Any question?
On the GECOM matter, you said the commissioners should have already filed a complaint with the ERC. Do you think, I mean, I know when these investigations start and for recommendations to come out, it's a long process. Do you see any resolution to this matter before local or national elections?
I hope that the Ethnic Relations Commission would work expeditiously, because their work would be seminal. I remember when there were charges on the PPP that house lots were distributed in a partisan fashion, that employment in the public service was done favorable to a particular ethnic group. There were complaints filed before the Ethnic Relations Commission. And they did comprehensive studies on these issues and made those findings public. And I want to urge all Guyanese, it's not just about because it's Ethnic Relations Commission, but it's just ethnic discrimination that you have to go to the commission on. I believe they have a responsibility to ensure that people are not politically discriminated against. So it's not just about race, because we have a lot of Afro-Guyanese party members who have suffered tremendously at the hands of this government based on political discrimination. And so I'll urge them also to approach the Ethnic Relations Commission. So it's not just about race. It's also about fairness as Guyanese, to be treated fairly in a transparent way as Guyanese. Yes.
Mr. Jagdeo, you said everybody's grabbing ministries, they're running to the ministries. Can you give us some examples of this?
Well, I gave you 8 areas. I haven't seen you follow up on any of this. The media can't have me do your work for you too. What about the one with the fuel smuggling? So, you know who the people are. You know how many certificates are there. Why not dig deeper and get all the connections? Then you will see how high it goes up into the government, how they're tampering with the gasoline prices at the pump just to make it lucrative for those who are engaged in smuggling. That is why they don't want to adjust the price at the pump, because a huge cabal that reaches very high into the office of the president, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Public Works in the fuel smuggling arrangement, that they don't want the prices change at the pump because it becomes less lucrative. But if you're an investigative reporter, you will get to this in 2 weeks. It's all there, it's visible to us. Look at the one about the explanations from the government in terms, you have the numbers now, in terms of people who've come and gone. So the minister, Pagwali, made it about race. And this has nothing to do, and I'm just it's disgusting, the lack of ability to comprehend an issue. We want to know whether the people, it was about trafficking. It's about treating these immigrants who come here unfairly. We don't have a problem people coming here, living here, working here, once they comply with all of our laws and the government issues them fairly with permits, etc. It is the people who are being, the Haitians, who have been trafficked through Guyana. Trafficked through Guyana. They have to pay large sums of money to come through here, to get documents, and then to go off illegally. The same thing with Cubans. So she goes after, she made it about race. So 74 Bangladeshis didn't go back from 2013. And why are we not mentioning the Bangladeshis? Why are we not mentioning the Bangladeshis? We know they may be trafficked through, but you had 6,500 Asians in just the last 3 years who have disappeared. They came in, I'm sure they left. Most of them left. I'm sure about that. But how did they leave if they're not recorded in our departure records? Where did they disappear? They didn't go upwards into the sky. They disappeared. People from the government helped them out. Helped them out helped them out of the country, I mean. But the help came at a price. So that is what we were concerned about. And so this is how it's about. Why not investigate that? Dig a little bit deeper. Just go around and ask. You may find what's going on. So new way, someone came in the country and said to me that now a lot of the Haitians are told to put that they're going to the Marriott on their immigration form. They ask people to fill up the forms on board for them. They put Marriott, but they don't necessarily go to the Marriott. That's part of the ring that is operating, so that they probably get an easy passage through immigration. Why not? What about the media? What work are you doing to investigate this? If the government says you have now nearly 20-something thousand people more, that is a sizable part of our population who came into the country, didn't leave. These are Cubans and Haitians and others who didn't leave. Then is this not a big story? And this happened in just 3 years. Does it now raise concern? So you're asking me to do your work, and then the other areas that I spoke about. Go undercover and ask to buy a gun license. One of you, one of the members of the media, and then you will see how it's done. Get somebody you know to apply, and then you will see how high it goes and how much you have to pay. In other countries, this is done. Here I don't see that sort of investigation being done. We have listed 8 or 10 areas. You just go and get the records of the National Procurement Authority, NPTA, and ask for them. Say the law says you have to publish these records, put them online. So we want access to the records, and we'd like to see the evaluation of some of these, because then you will see the perversion of the evaluation that takes place there. It's open to everyone. So please, this is your work too. This is your work, not just for any political party. The media, yes, please.
I'm interrupting Country News. Sir, I just have multiple questions. You
Yes,
said
sure.
earlier that it would be a totally different struggle if the government
Yes.
gets back into power because
If it's illegal, illegitimate government, if it's a illegal, illegitimate government that is in office because of fraud that is recognized by everyone,
Good.
that the nature of the struggle changes.
Good. Because you said it would be illegal and illegitimate.
Yes.
Are you saying that now the government is legal and legitimate?
We have treated the government that way. What?
No,
How
because
else?
I know you had these elections petitions and you
Yes,
said
we but we have been engaging with the government. I write the president, we treating the government as legal now and legitimate. That's how we are treating them, regardless of our petition.
Okay. The other question, sir, there was a recent oil forum at Carolina that marked the official
I know
launch.
Kaichur will come. All right, go ahead,
That
yeah.
marked the official launch of Liza Phase 1.
Uh-huh.
Sir, I didn't see you at this forum, and I haven't seen you at similar of these kinds. Is it a specific statement of yours to stay away from these, or weren't you invited?
I was invited. I tend not to go out too often to these activities. That's it.
You didn't see
I
me?
can't handle the platitudes and the small talk sometimes. And I don't want to disparage people's activities. I don't want to be like a spoil sport. I throw cold water on people's, joy. But it's just I'm not cut out for those sorts of things. To have to listen to Trotman quote the scriptures with all the illegalities that he has presided over. Quote the scriptures extensively. It turns my stomach.
Okay.
It turns my stomach to have to go through that sort of thing. So I'm glad in this case I did not have to go. About how the oil will be, and Exxon will be like our savior. We have to be our own saviors, the people of this country, all 800,000 of us and those who live abroad. We are our own saviors, and we can also destroy our country. But it has to be based on our intellect, our plans, because we have a common future. People who come here because of our resources, we welcome them, but they have a motive to make money. That's not bad, but we have to determine where our country goes. And I am not in favor of treating anybody who comes here as our savior and we must go down on our knees and be beholden to them. Simply because they spend a little money in our economy. We've gone through, our ancestors fought a long time, come out of slavery, out of indentureship, we became independent. That is what I believe in. I grew up with those ideals. And so I cringe, literally, when I see people who are supposed to represent us say these things. It makes the others laugh at us. The others laugh at us. There are no end to this psychophancy that goes on.
Mr.
And so, yeah.
We're still at a draft stage for our national oil spill pipeline. There hasn't been a real conversation on how first the oil industry can affect our environment.
Sure.
Even the opposition has been kind of silent. What is your view on the fact that less than 2 years away from first oil, we have clear and agreed upon national oil spill response plan, and that we seem to have little in place in general?
This is not unique. This is not unique to what is happening in the sector. That all the things that our government was supposed to do to protect us, Guyanese, as a people and to protect our interests, they have failed on. They're supposed to negotiate a contract after we had established 3.2 billion barrels of reserves, a contract that was better than the one when that was given to ExxonMobil when we were trying to get them to explore. They did not. They were supposed to, in fact, ExxonMobil came out ahead in those negotiations. And that's putting it mildly. Secondly, they're supposed to get the Sovereign Wealth Fund to protect our interests. They failed on that. They failed on the Petroleum Commission. They failed on local content. And it's the same pattern. They're failing to address this issue in a manner that is the environmental issue and the potential for tackling, how we tackle an oil spill, in the same manner that they have addressed everything else. That, you know, a haphazard manner without looking out for our interests. So this is my view of our government. And it's not, they are just busy waiting for one thing. They dribble the oil money. That's all they're saying. They just have this obsession, the oil money will, and I am saying to you, if we don't address these critical issues, if we don't address the rest of the economy, Guyana will be worse off in the next decade than we are now. You read the experience of many of those countries. Go to the assessment in Chad and Nigeria and all of those places. And just here, Venezuela, where they are today. And you will recognize that we probably be worse off.
Okay, I don't want to dominate, but if nobody else can.
Yeah.
When you're done.
Okay. Sir, two final questions. One, last week you noted that GPL has been operating without a board since January. I did a story on that, and in my research for the story, I came across the code for GPL, which stipulates how the company must operate, and that it really shouldn't be operating without the board. These issues and all the issues that the opposition keep talking about. You're talking and nothing is happening, but you have an opportunity to take motions and other things to Parliament. Are you going to explore this avenue?
That's when we can get our motions heard. The Parliament, you know, in another country, in a country where you have a thriving democracy, there's so many issues that you have like a weekly Parliament. Here we have one that like every 2 months we wait for a sitting. And by the time you go through formalities and Nagamotu needed to go home to rest, then we only have 3-4 hours. And then the government will say, oh, we need to bring something emergency, let's pass it. Forget all of those issues. It gets deferred again. So that is what Parliament has become. We can't even get our issues debated here. So when you have to wait 2-3 months to even get something on the agenda of the Parliament, and then another 6 months to have it resolved or debated, it defeats the whole argument about a functioning Parliament. That is the limitation there.
Okay, and my final question. When I look at these oil contracts, all of them, they have, even if it's a small amount, they have money that has to be paid over to the government of Guyana for capacity building, and then there's the next sum that had to be paid for licensing, rental. These monies have been being paid since, all right, let me start in 1999 by Exxon, CGX, and Repsol, and all these people who have existing contracts. But at this stage, where we're almost at first oil, Guyana is in a deficit of professionals needed for the industry. Where has the money been going?
Well, you're talking about small sums of money, all right? Relatively small sums. So we have a bigger concern about a larger sum that we've all been talking about, and yet this government refuses to address it. So in the pleadings before the case we have filed, from the pleadings from the Attorney General's chamber, in the case we have filed to have the 18 million transferred to the consolidated fund, they said that the consolidated fund is made up of several accounts. So implying that the money is in an account in the consolidated fund already. Yet, when we were debating the release of 700 odd million Guyana dollars to pay our lawyers for the case, Carl Grenade said that that sum, equivalent sum, will be transferred into the consolidated fund. So the pleadings that from the AG's chamber says that the money implies that the money is already in the consolidated fund. Carl Grenade then says it will be transferred. But there is a litmus test about how you know if money is in the consolidated fund or not. Go to the estimates in 2016. They received the money in 2016, about September, October. And it's nowhere in our estimates or revenue figures for that year. And it's nowhere in the revenue figures for 2017 too. So that money, for all practical purposes, doesn't exist based on the financial laws, because if it's not there in the financial statements of the government, then it can be audited. It's a simple test you do. Check the 2016 figures that Jordan presented and the 2017. So I have bigger concerns about that. The understating of our revenue for 2016 by 18 million US dollars, the understating of our revenue for 2017 by 18 million dollars. That changes everything. That changes the size of the fiscal deficit and several other macro variables. But they were willing to tamper with that just to keep the money hidden, the 18 million. So when I say the licensing fees and stuff, it's like $1 million, etc. And I suspect it's paid into the Geology and Mines Commission, and you may be able to track that through an audit or requesting them information. I have no doubt that the money that is paid into GGMC will be properly accounted for. I have no doubt about that. It is this money that I believe was being kept off the books. And if that happened for a few years, it will just be used up by them. Yes.
Mr. Jagdeo, James 19 News. On the issue of GECOM, when you talk about we wouldn't have the peace now if the elections are rigged, whatever, what does that mean?
It means, I said it, the nature of the struggle changes. So you look at how people, when you have a legitimate government, a government that you accept as legal, there are acceptable forms of struggle. You know, you can protest peacefully, you can go to the parliament, you use the rules. But if they don't live by the rules, they come to power without observing the rules, then the other side should not be bound by any rules too, because it's a freedom struggle. It changes from a struggle within a democracy, an established democracy, to one of freedom, fighting for freedom. And that's different.
Which entails what?
Well, I don't want to define all of that. You let Harman guess what that means. Let Harman guess what that means. I want him to guess.
And the second question is, recently Mr. Nandla and Mr. Mustafa would have appealed to the acting Chief Justice ruling on the GECOM matter. What's your take on that?
Well, we appealed it, and we're hoping to have an early hearing. I believe it's a perverse decision. as we've said publicly. And that is why we've appealed it. And we asked for an expeditious hearing because we believe one way or another this will end up at the CCJ. And because if there's a ruling in our favor at the Court of Appeal, they would probably take it to the CCJ. And if it's a ruling in the government's favor, we will take it to the CCJ. So that's why we asked for an expeditious hearing.
But given the criteria which is set out, like for example, one of the reasons for the challenge is that Mr. Patterson was a pallbearer at Mr. Hoyt's funeral.
No, but those were extraneous. That is what I believe that the Chief Justice acting focused on the extraneous issues. Those are extraneous, whether he is pallbearer or advisor, etc. The core issue is about the constitutionality of his appointment. That it was the core issue. And so while the Chief Justice found that he did not, her earlier hearing said he had to give reasons. And she recognized in this judgment that he didn't give reasons, yet said that, upheld the decision in his favor. That is the president's favor. So that is the core issue. And so I think this law, the treaties that we got on all of these issues, those are irrelevant issues. It was not Patterson that we were challenging. We were challenging the president's unconstitutional act, not Patterson. It could have been anyone else. That was not the nature of the challenge about the individual Patterson. So if that was the challenge, we'd say, okay, we don't like Patterson, but it's okay if the president did this, but choose another individual, somebody who's younger, not pallbearer, etc. That was never the contention. And it was misdirected to that issue. That's what we feel. So to justify it, so gain some sympathy and stuff, saying Jagdeo was also spoke at Hoyt's funeral, etc. That's extraneous, totally so. We never challenged Patterson. Because as I said before, had we done that, we would have accepted, well, it's okay for the president to appoint, but just we don't like this man. That was not it. We challenged the constitutionality of his act because we have a formula enshrined in the Constitution that all the parties in Guyana complied with for over 25 years. And this president came along and unilaterally changed that. And we're contending that he does not have the authority to do that. It not only violated the Constitution, but also the spirit of the engagement, where the GECOM chairman must enjoy the confidence of both sides, because that person, as we have just seen, has a casting vote.
But Mr. Jagdeo, those that you deemed extraneous were also part of the party's application.
They may have been in the pleadings too, but that was the core issue. How could you, miss that and focus on everything else?
And finally for me, we're about less than 2 years before we head into the next elections. Has the party started to round up its candidates or the face for the campaign, presidential, prime ministerial, and things like that?
We're right now doing work on the ground, and we are encouraging more young people to join up. I already told you about our strong efforts in the hinterland to better understand the challenges there. The people doing some work in the sugar and the rice belt and some other areas affected. I've had 2 fora already with bringing in more Afro-Guyanese into the party. All of that has happened. So that's what we're working on. We believe later we'll come up with those issues, but right now we want people to understand that we have a plan for all of Guyana. We're putting down basic elements of this plan, so at some point in time we unveil it very early. We're not waiting until 2020 to unveil our plans for the future and how every Guyanese will fit into that plan. Young people, older folks, people of every race and every religion must feel secure that the plan we have will cater for all of their growth and development. That is what we're working.
Mr. Jagdeo, how would you respond to persons who have pointed out, this is on the GECOM matter, that the party has been silent in the past when the top brass of GECOM was predominantly East Indian descent. How would you respond to that? Also that two members of GECOM, senior staff, went on to work with the PPP as well.
Yeah, but the top brass is, what do you mean by top brass?
Well,
You mean one or two persons? Because the complaints, as Alexander confirmed, did not start yesterday. I remember as early as 2001, we had these issues about hiring practices. It went through the entire period when Gokul Budu was there as the CEO of GECOM. Through that period, we complained about the same things, exactly. A fair hiring practice. We saw cases where teachers, university students would fail the exam to be presiding officers, and people who did not even complete primary school got the nod ahead of them. So this is not new. Maybe it was not so vocal, but if you only research the issue, you will see that this has been a long-standing complaint about the PPP, regardless of who was there.
So therefore it's not about race, it's about the process.
Yeah, but that's what I said at the beginning, that it is, but it seems, and this is not just about any Afro-Guyanese. That's what I said. If you are Afro-Guyanese and PPP, Alexander will give you 0-2. Alexander might give you 0-2. Or your ordinary person. This is not about that. This is about fairness in the process. So that is what I've argued constantly. I said it the last time. I said it openly. This is not about race. This is about a fair system of hiring professionals, not party people to run the thing. As we have seen now, that it seems as though the only reason that some of these candidates got high marks is because of open advocacy on behalf of APNU in the pre-election period the last time.
What is the party's position on GECOM's failure to address the Auditor General's report on the procurement practices at the entity?
Well, I saw the chairman saying that it should go to the police. But you know who is going to call the police? Harman and Ramjatan and the others. Nothing will happen there. I don't have any faith that anything will happen with that dispensation over there. Yeah, anything else? Thank you.